Hello, everyone. Welcome to Opinions New by Dr. Frank Shea. I'm Frank. Right? In this episode, I want to talk about the US and China in globalization and anti-globalization. Okay? As we know that globalization as a way for human beings to exist or coexist and progress together uh, has been in existence for probably thousands of years. But the globalization in a modern sense probably has only a history of half a century. Right? As a way for as an integration of as a way of integration in economics, culture, politics, and immigration. If this is done, globalization is done correctly, we can that can bring about the cultural exchange to enrich our culture, share of resource, and help each other, between the nations. But if this is not done correctly, if it's abused, and if the rules are broken, and then there's a lack of respect to the culture, the nationality, the social system of the other countries, and then bad things could happen, right? And then there could be a increase of wealth disparity and the formation of unfairness in society. So, but in my opinion, the globalization and anti-globalization or counter-globalization, if you want to say it, actually has something to do with the decay of morality of human being, and also with the atrocity of global communism. Right? And now, with this with the emergence of new trend of counter-globalization, we must find a way to solve the problem. Okay? So, in fact, it seemed to me that the counter-globalization, as we see, is actually happening at the same time as the global community is fighting, the communism and the socialism in the world today. There's the anti-communism, socialism process that's going on. So counter-globalization seems to me is only a temporary strategy. And then, at least in America, I think the the process of fighting global communism and socialism has become something of a consensus among American public and American government and public. Right? And we have seen that America has adopted this new Indo-Pacific strategy and also is supporting democracies all over the world and also changing the supply chain of the world and replacing China as the global factory. And all these have made a new wave of globalization possible. Okay. First, let's go a little back onto from a historical perspective as to what is a globalization. Right? The so-called globalization, is actually something that involves the process of integrating the governments, societies, and companies, enterprises, organizations, and ordinary citizens in a worldwide, situation, right, in the globe. Okay? And of course, when we talk about a process, that involves so many countries, organizations, and the public, so globalization is quite complicated. It's multifaceted, very complex phenomenon. Many people believe that the globalization is just the expansion of capitalism. That could be true, and it's because the global capitalists are rearranging or adjusting the global allocation of resource, and which is unregulated and uncontrolled, and they're trying to build a global marketplace. It's a global market economy. I wouldn't say this saying is wrong, but the thing is, if you want to achieve this goal, you have a truly worldwide global economy, or global market, have a free flow of capital, right? And the maximization of profit, and also cooperations among different economic entities. You have to have all the participants, including those capital, owners of capitals, capitalists, bankers, entrepreneurs, the finance ministries of the countries, economic ministries, businesses, they all have to follow one set of rule that's fair and reasonable and legal. Okay? And also, of course, we have to protect the interests of the weak parties, the weakest parties, and also the environment has to ensure the justice in justice and also national sovereignty. Only with all these are protected or ascertained, then the globalization can truly take place. Yeah. If some organizations have a special privilege, no matter it's a national government, business, or the rich people, they could use this globalization as a way to benefit themselves, or at expense of other groups or other people or other countries, and then with the no guarantee of the equal protection, then globalization is probably not going to uh, proceed any further or not go as planned. So then global counter-globalization or could take place. That's exactly what happened. Right? The progress of globalization comes with, becomes a being, becomes reality, together with progress in science and technology. Because the science and technology in communication and transportation, our global village becomes smaller, right? Instant communications, cross ocean, cross continent travel, right? Large scale movement of the goods and capital, right? And technology, and that all makes the globalization possible. From steam automotives to steam boats, right? To trucks, cars, local trains, to ocean liners, container ships, to jetliners, right? To the internet and the things of Internet of Things, to telegram, telephone, fax, to cell phones we have today, and internet, of course. All these are the necessary tools for globalization. And also, globalization brings about the global trade, global cooperation, global exchange, and exchange of all the cultures and nationalities. Of course, the major force behind globalization is economics and trade, right? But it comes with together with the economics and economies and trade are the social, cultural, environmental, humanities, and also global political and diplomatic exchange and conflict. Okay? From economic perspective, globalization entails the exchange and free flow of products, services, resource, labor, capital, knowledge, technology, and data. Yeah. Because of globalization, there is the need for global market, including consumer market, product market, and capital market. Right? And also capital, product, market, technology, and labor needs to move across countries, across the borders. And then we have to break up the custom, the tariff, and quota, and all those barriers to global trade. Mm. The scholars have designated the starting of globalization as early as when the Europeans found the new continent, found America. And some even say this is actually took place, 3000 BC, right? But most majority believe that the globalization in a contemporary sense actually started in contemporary period, right? And you could say that the globalization started as early as 1820s when the first industrial revolution started in Great Britain. But, but in the 19th to 20th centuries, because of the integration of world economy, the globalization is accelerating. But as to the terminology of globalization, it did not start until the 1970s and became widely used. As to the contents of globalization, IMF, International Monetary Fund, defined globalization as having four facets: trade and exchange, capital and investment, uh, immigration and flow of labor, right? And the dissemination of knowledge. So that's four aspects here, right? Later on, people added the global environmental challenge, such as, excuse me, global warming, cross-border water rights, and air pollutions, and overfishing, ocean fishing, and they tie all of these with the globalization. That's reasonable also. Okay? In academia, we basically talk about the globalization into three facets, three aspects: economic globalization, cultural globalization, and political globalization. Of course, the three are interconnected and they're interactive. Okay? Even though the term globalization started in 1970s, but it did not become it became hotly debated, controversial term in the 1990s when a journalist from Sweden, Thomas Larsson, wrote a book. The title of the book is "The Race to the Top: The Real Story of Globalization." And he actually had a very vivid description of globalization. That is, so-called globalization is that the earth shrinks and the distance shortens and things become closer to each other, Okay? Professor Manfred Steger is a global studies professor from Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology University, or RMIT Technology University. He said that in addition to economic globalization, cultural globalization, and political globalization, there should be an ecological globalization and ideological globalization, which is quite true, right? And the ideological globalization penetrates or covers the other four, which I agree. Right? The adoption of international standards has a great significance in globalization process, from ISO standards, global standards, to film speed, and to the size of the container shipping, okay, to global money and transfer or payment system like a SWIFT, all provided the benefits or provided convenient tools to globalization, right? Also, all the tariffs and the trade agreements, right? All those free trade agreements, FTAs, from GATT, GATT, to the NAFTA, to EU, to WTO, all of them actually help to reduce the level of tariffs and quotas um, between the countries, among the countries, and which helped with the good and service trade of the countries. In China, back in the first century, in China, we know there was the Silk Road, right, which is part of the globalization in history. The Silk Road really helped ancient China, Indian subcontinent, Persia, Europe, and Arab world. Right? It's very significant to all of them. Right? And it also encompassed the interaction in politics and economics, among countries. Silk Road is not just to facilitate the trade of silk. Actually, other things like sugar and salt are also major commodities being traded. Not only that, religious beliefs, philosophical thinking, all kind of technologies, craftsmanship, even contagious diseases are all being exchanged on the Silk Road. Of course, we heard about you might have heard about the Belt and Road Initiative, Belt and Road Initiative of China, of Communist China, BRI. Even though it has the shadow or the shape of Silk Road, but it has really some bad intentions. And now the whole world has come to the realization of its good evil intention by the Chinese Communist Party. And now people are, the BRI has become highly focused, is highly controversial, right? And of course, we have heard about the trade war between U.S. and China, right? And the Chinese communist rule, and we are paying attention to what kind of role China plays in globalization. In the past 20 or some years, China has been intertwined or merged with globalization in the global economic system. But the role China played and also the chaos it brought about, and also the extraordinary monetary benefit it gained from this participation, all led to the big troubles we have. The world is having with communist China, right? And of course, the economic globalization, with economic globalization, the interdependence between the countries economically is increasing, right? And also cross-country, cross-border trade of merchandise, product, service, and technology, and transfer of capital are all increasing. And in the process of globalization by businesses and businesses, right? Of course, the business owners, they hope to deregulate, and to lower the tariffs, business taxes, capital gain taxes, and payroll taxes, and all those things that interfere with economic development and trade, right? They hope to have a global market, even a globalized market, even a one single global market. Right? Now, the trend today with globalization is that the developed countries are using FDI, foreign direct investment, and try to eliminate the trade barriers, right? And conduct or enact, economic reform, change immigration laws to combine or to integrate with developing countries, right? But no doubt there's absolutely no balanced development in global economy, right? As the economies improve and economic integration takes place, labors are moving towards high earning areas, and capital is moving towards low wage areas, and then there are consequences as a result of that. And with the technology, with the development of human society and the tools of communication and transportation, globalization is inevitable, right? And the exchange of goods, service, information, technology, and knowledge and culture that makes our world, intertwined. In the past 50 years, with the rapid exchange, rapid development of science, technology, and in communication, transportation, and globalization is increasing very fast. It's accelerating, and it's having more and more impact. But at the same time, the globalization also stirred up, the hottest debate in the past 10 years because of the unequal benefit from the economic, cooperation, and also the impact on employment in the employment in different countries. And some countries still maintain a high tariff as not protecting intellectual property rights, and even use state power to steal technology, like what the Chinese government does, right? Or because they refuse to open up their their market for foreign investment, right? So all those unfair trade and investment system, right, they have in place that hurt the interest of the developing countries as well as developed countries. So all those, have set a tone for the counter globalization to take place. Yeah. Those who support globalization believe that China, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Thailand, and India, and all this, they reduce poverty by opening their doors to the world. But people who are arguing against globalization also say that, pointing out that globalization it's kind of like exploitation to some countries, and they led to large-scale poverty and social unrest, and also sabotaged or destroyed, ecological system. For China, during its process of joining globalization, especially after its open and reform policy in 1978 and its accession into WTO in 2001, that led to some large-scale reduction in empowerment in China. The impoverished people in China reduced from 250 million in 1978 to about 34 million in 1999, because the number is questionable to a certain degree, especially after China was accepted into WTO in 2001. The poverty rate reduced by 1/3 in three years. Also a little questionable, the number, but at least globalization brought China huge benefit. But things are again, you look at today, what Chinese Premier Li Keqiang said, that in China there's still 600 million people with a monthly income of less than 1,000 Chinese dollars, which is about I would say 1,000 Chinese dollars. That's about to $150 US dollars. Okay? 152, 150, around the 150 US dollars, which shows the uneven development in China, within China. And the biggest country, the biggest partner for China's merging into global economic system, and also from which China gains the most benefit, is the United States. But after President Trump came to office, it stopped the unfair support of China, right, with regard to this. And also, he's not tolerating the huge trade deficit with China, and also he's not overlooking the theft of technology and IP rights. Okay? And then he started the trade war with China in 2008, which actually started the process of anti-globalization or counter-globalization. So why counter-globalization? Right? Why is there such a thing called anti-globalization or counter-globalization? So this is actually a theory or argument against globalization. Right? The reason for this argument is that they think that large corporations, through all kinds of free trade agreement and capital market, they have unlimited political power, and in order to maximize their profit, they sacrifice the work conditions and safety conditions of laborers, and also even the national legislation and national sovereignty. So since 2012, those people who are against globalization called our world economy like accelerated capitalism, or market extremism, or gambling capitalism, and or the McDonald's world, etc. Right? Yeah. And some of the advocates for anti-globalization, they're not really completely against globalization. They're all calling for an orderly, globalization and global integration with democracy, human rights, fair trade, and sustainable development. So they think that if you just say anti-globalization is somewhat misleading. Okay? And those opponents believe that in the 20th century, second half of 20th century, some elites try to control world market. They believe those all those agreements, global agreements, global enterprises, IMF, WTO, World Bank, and they're eroding the power and decision making of the countries, and so they could move goods, natural resources, and labor as they wish, across the globe. And with regard to this, President Trump and his economic cabinet seems to be believing that an orderly and globalization and that guarantees national sovereignty, fair competition, human rights, and sustainable development is fine. It's okay, but it's not the one we have now that is out of control and that is being used unfairly used by some other countries like China, right? And also kind of with disregard of human rights and intellectual property rights. I tend to agree with that, right? If if it's globalization that suppress the national sovereignty and is run under a super global organization, and then now we are not really running as the global village per se with a global government. We have all kinds of different 200 different governments. So it's not really practical for us to have that. So there's the issue of fairness, human rights issues, labor protection, child labor, prison labor, environmental protection, all things we have to face. So you can say that anti-globalization is started from America with the support of President Trump. Right? Trump's economic policy and all his withdrawals from different global groups, global organizations, international organizations, seem to have accelerated this anti-globalization movement. Right? What Trump is against, it seems to be, is the political globalization and the ideological globalization, and also the unfair part of economic globalization. That is, in the Chinese communists in this globalization is actually trying to export this Marxism and communism ideology and try to gain unfair advantage from globalization. And that, of course, resulted in clash with America. Right? That's the globalization, anti-globalization. To be honest, I think any person with the reason and rationality, nobody with the reason and rationality is going to be against globalization, because the global exchange, integration and communication is inevitable, right? And the American political landscape, the left, they're not really completely against globalization because their principles, the global cooperation, even the Chinese communists, what Chinese communists are proposing, the common destination of humanity, right? They all have something to do with with globalization in there, right? The right wing part, the right in the American politics, they're not really completely against globalization, right? They're against the part that's not fair or not reasonable. America in the future, I don't think we're heading to isolationism, and we're not going to close off our country, right? I believe America will become orderly, open to those countries with freedom and democracy. And for those countries that practice free trade and provide protection for international property rights, America still is going to open its door, I believe. Right? So there are many huge impacts of globalization to a human society. Right? And I'm not going to into that part. What's the American strategy on globalization? Right? And also, what's the Chinese ambition in globalization? Right? In China, in this global repositioning or the reallocation of enterprises, right, or supply chain, right? Whichever country that can maintain high-end, high value-added, high technology industries and gain the highest amount of profit, and which country that can have a middle level production and manufacturing, and which country that can have only low end, low value added industries, and only buy those outdated low tech, in the companies or supply chains, supply chain factories. All these are something that the countries are fighting for, right? The Chinese one, from the Chinese government perspective, they try to upgrade their industry, right? They want to try to upgrade their enterprises, state-owned enterprises. They have adopted this 863 project, right? Thousand talent project, etc. They're all part of a Chinese effort to dash into get into advance the ranks of the developed countries, trying to get the high point in global war on science and technology. Of course, that's going to in conflict with America. There's a huge conflict here, right? And the Chinese way of doing that, they steal, they force, technology transfer, which is not acceptable. What are the American strategies in the global counter-globalization? It seemed to me the American society and the American economy, ever since 2017, when President Trump took office, have changed greatly. Right? Before China, the CCP virus and the Wuhan pandemic, U.S. economy was really at its peak. Right? The number of people employed, the employment rate, the total size of economy, capital market and stock market, American military power, the overall power of the country, all reached a new high. Right? Excuse me. Even though this Wuhan pandemic has a huge impact on America, but I think the American recovery is going to be huge as well. Right? Excuse me. Now, with globalization, when dealing with globalization, I think the Trump administration is doing in fighting both fronts, right? High tech and low tech, right? Of course, from the ideological perspective, America is going back to more traditional values, conservative, which is great, right? On the economic side, America is attracting capitals back to the country and protecting Americans' own high technology sector, and also fighting Chinese theft of technology, and also the middle to low level manufacturing or technologies are also being brought back to United States, and we have seen those middle to low level manufacturing coming back to U.S. as well, which help to reduce the unemployment in this country. I don't believe America is going back to isolationism, but the Trump administration is trying to build a fair, effective, and a clean, international system. He's cleaning up organizations, global organizations, from UN to WHO to WTO, and clear up with the corruptions and the low efficiency. And the thing is, with this, we know that the benefits from globalization, economic globalization, may not be evenly distributed, partly because the owners of those capitals and leading technologies, the Western countries, they are playing a leading role in this globalization, right? But then those ambitious developing countries, such as China under China's communist, of course, is not happy with that. Is quite jealous about that. So trying hard to change the rule, right? When they cannot change the rule, they actually just refuse to follow the rule, right? They don't have the sense of a contract or trust. That's the key to Western civilization, and that's one reason I think why there is a trade war between U.S. and China. Right? Now, by now, America has come to the realization that in the past 40 years, the strategy toward China is really, feeding the enemy. Okay? Now, America is stopping that strategy, and has come to, I believe, America is already in a cold war with communist China. Okay? Now, I don't think. I think the American is probably very, very well ready, very ready to fight a hot war with China, with communist China. The hot war could be in the South China Sea, or Taiwan Strait, or East China Sea, and American Navy is probably ready to wipe out the Chinese naval forces so as to get rid of the threat to the safe passage of in the global waters of South China Sea, and also decoupling of the United States with China with regard to politics, diplomacy, economics, trade, and military is not something that's hard to imagine. It's probably ongoing right now. Okay, so in conclusion, even though the globalization is gaining or going right into the stage of counter-globalization, right? But I think it's just temporary. It should be temporary. Once the global political landscape changes, and once the terrorism, communism and socialism countries are cleaned out, a new global trade or trade system will emerge, and the globalization will be reborn with a new meaning and contents. Yeah. Globalization as a way for humanities to coexist and to co-develop, to work together, has been there for thousands of years, and is continue to stay, and to be there. And globalization, as is a new contemporary sense, has become a tool for integration and exchange of all the nations and all the countries with regard to its economy, culture, political, and immigration. Okay? And it could change, once it's on the right track, it bring about all the benefits of multicultural and flourished, enriched culture, and the share of common resources, and help each other, help all the nationalities in the world with each other. Okay, so, and all the countries like China, Chinese communists, you know, with their abuse of the globalization, with the global the rule and sabotage of the rules, and this lack